Welcome back, guys. So let's go into the next bone. So now we're going to talk about the next bone, which is the humerus. In our first video we talked about the clavicle and the scapula. So now we're going to talk about the humerus. That's this bone. It's the largest bone of the upper limb. Very the largest of all the bones of the upper limb. You can see it now. The humerus. So okay, you can see that the humerus is forming an articulation with the scapula, right? It's forming an articulation with the scapula. This articulation is forming with the scapula is a joint called the Glenohumera Joint, which you normally know as, you usually call it the shoulder joint. So it's known as the Glenohumera Joint. It's a joint formed by the what? By the head of the humerus and the glenoid fossa of the scapula. It also forms another articulation here. It forms this articulation with this bone, which is medially placed. This bone of the forearm, which is medially placed, known as the ulna. So this joint is forming part of the elbow joint. So if this bone, to which is laterally placed, the radius, if it is fully flexed, it's going to come and form articulation with the humerus also. So these two bones and these, they form together, they form the elbow joint. So that's it. So the humerus is divided, we can divide it to make it more simple, divide it into three parts. We have the proximal part, we have the shaft, and we have the distal part. The proximal part, the shaft, and the distal part. So now let's talk about the proximal part. From this now, you can see the proximal part the way it is. You can see that the proximal part has this part which forms articulation with the glenoid fossa of the scapula. This is known as the head of the humerus. So this is the head of the humerus. Then you can see that there is a depression here, and you can see a projection here, right? A depression and a projection here. Then you can also see another projection here, right? So the question now is, you can see that this depression is separating the head from this tubercle. So this depression you can see now is known as the anatomical neck. So you have the head and you have now the anatomical neck, which is separating the head from this tubercle. So this tubercle has a name. This is known as the lesser tubercle of the humerus and the greater tubercle. So the anatomical neck, which runs, you can see, is running this way. So it's going to separate the head, it's going to demarcate the head from the tubercles. You have the one which is laterally placed and at a higher height. That's why it's called the greater tubercle. And you have this one which is placed like more distally, than is placed distal to this greater tubercle, and that's why it's called the lesser tubercle. So you have the greater tubercle and the lesser tubercle, and then you have a depression, like a sulcus, a groove existing between this greater tubercle and this lesser tubercle. And this groove, because it's existing between greater and lesser, it is in between, is called the intertubercular sulcus. Sulcus means groove, sulcus means depression. So it's a depression between the two tubercles, intertubercular sulcus. Or you also call it the bicipital groove. Why is it called bicipital? Because long head of the tricep brachial is going to pass through here. Are you getting it? So a head of the tricep brachial, that's why it's called tricep bicipital groove. So that's it for. Yeah, then you also have this one. It's not prominent. It's just imaginary. this is where the humerus is very prone to fracture if there should be a fracture in this proximal part, and that's known as the surgical neck. So we talked about the head, we talked about anatomical neck, we talked about the tubercles greater and lesser, and we talked about the intertubercular sulcus. So now after saying that, after talking about that, we are going to go into the shaft. You can see the shaft. You can see the shaft. So this is the shaft. And this shaft, you can see it has anterior surface and a posterior surface. This anterior surface, what you should look at, the most important prominent structure there is this. There's this projection here within this region. There's this projection, and this is known as the deltoid tubercle. The deltoid tubercle. The deltoid tubercle. The deltoid tubercle. And this tubercle is usually for, there's a muscle called the deltoid muscle. It's going to run from this shoulder, form its attachment with the clavicle, form attachment to the acromion spine, form attachment with the clavicle, and then to descend downwards and form attachment here. And form an attachment here. And this is called the deltoid muscle. So this tubercle where it will insert is known as the deltoid tubercle. So it's going to run down and insert here. Are you getting it? So that's for the anterior surface of the shaft. That's the most important prominent structure or prominent landmark. So now for the posterior aspect, the most important thing you need to take note of is here. Now you're going to find a groove. There's an oblique groove. There's an oblique groove. There's an oblique groove. There's an oblique groove. This oblique groove is known as the radial groove, and the groove usually contains, there's a nerve called the radial nerve, a branch of the brachial plexus. We're going to talk about that in one of our videos to come. So the brachial plexus, a branch of it called the radial nerve, is going to pass through this groove. There's also another artery, a branch of an artery called the brachial artery. We'll talk about it. The branch is called the profundo brachial artery, profundal brachial artery, profundal brachial artery. It's going to also pass through this groove. So there are two structures that pass through this groove. The first one is what? Is the radial nerve, a branch of the what? Of the brachial plexus, and we have the profundal brachial artery, which is a branch of the what? Brachial artery. It's going to pass through this. Okay. Any other stuff? So that's it for the posterior surface. Now let's go into the distal part of humerus. You can see that the distal part of the humerus, it also has, look now, okay, we've not talked about something. For the shaft, now it's going to continue downwards, and it's going to form a projection here. This is it's facing this way, so this is the medial aspect, right? And this is the lateral aspect, right? So it's going to form a projection here. Are you seeing it? A projection. It's going to form a projection here, and this projection is known as the supraepicondyle ridge. But because it is medially placed close to the center of the body, medially, it's called the medial supracondylar ridge. Then you also have another one here. This is very prominent here. It's called, look at it. Are you seeing it? It's called the lateral supracondylar ridge. So you have the medial supracondylar ridge and the lateral supracondylar ridge. So now let's go more distally. When you go distally, you're going to find, you can see that there's another projection here too. That's this. This projection, look at it. It's called the epicondyle. This is the epicondyle. They also have another projection here. You can see it here. It's called another epicondyle. So we have the one medially placed and the one laterally placed. So that's why this is referred to as the medial epicondyle. And then we have this one laterally placed called the lateral epicondyle. So we have talked about the shaft, talked about the head, Talked about the prominent structure like the deltoid tubercle in the anterior surface and the radial groove in the posterior surface. We talked about the distal part. We said when you do distally on the shaft, we're going to find two prominent ridges. So you say we're going to find two prominent ridges. We have this and this. One medially placed, one laterally placed. The one which is medially placed is called the medial supracondylar ridge, and the one laterally placed, lateral supracondylar, and then we have epicondyle, medial and lateral. Right? Okay, now so let's move on to this one. You can see here this distal surface, this distal part of the humerus has this depression here. You can see this one is lateral, this one is medially placed. You can see this because this is the medial aspect. This is medially placed, and you can see this one which is laterally placed, right? So this medial one which is medially placed, you can see is right. This part of this is the ulna, right? And this ulna has a process called the coronoid process. So it's going to come and form an articulation. It's going to insert into this what? Into this fossa. So this is known as the coronoid fossa. And you can see this one which is laterally placed. When this when the forearm is fully flexed, when it's fully flexed, the head of the radius is going to come and insert into this groove, into this fossa, and that's why it's called the radial fossa. So we have the coronoid fossa and the radial fossa. Okay, so now let's go posteriorly. You can see posterior, you have this large triangular depression or fossa. This is called the olecranon. And the usefulness of this is that the olecranon of this bone, the ulna, is going to insert into this. I get it. That's why it's called the olecranon. Okay, so now we also have these articular surfaces. You can see these articular surfaces. This one is laterally placed and this one is medially placed. Just remember it with CT scan, right? So you have the capitulum and you have the trochlea. So the capitulum and the trochlea. So that's it. That's it for the humerus. Yeah. So we've talked about the head, the shaft, and the distal surface. So in our next video, we are going to talk about the radius, the ulna, and the other bones. We just a quick overview of those bones. So encourage us by subscribing to our channel, give it a thumbs up, comment, and share with your friends. So this is Lawrence on Travel Lectures. I'm happy to have you guys in this section. So I'm believing to see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.